Just gone 7 o'clock on New Year's Eve. Thursday, the 31st of December 2020. The last ever edition of MesmePolitics of this year. We'll, of course, be back tomorrow. We just keep on going through. We went through over Christmas. We'll be doing New Year's Day as well. My name's Toby Lepati Mesme. Welcome along. We are bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. For the next half hour, get in touch in the chat at any point. Come say hello and let us know your thoughts on whatever it is we happen to be talking about. And boy, have we got a show.
Prepare to die.
So, tonight, around 7:30, I want to talk about Gavin Williamson, how particularly inept he is as an education secretary, and his defence of his new testing diktat that he's thrown onto the schools out of the blue. Coming up soon, we will be talking about how doctors are unhappy with the second dose idea. So basically jettisoning the second dose of the vaccine, trying to push out as many first doses as possible and hope that works, basically. Some doctors are unhappy. It's a bit of contention. Jonathan Van Tam seems very much on board with the idea, and I'm inclined to trust Jonathan Van Tam. But we will be talking about what exactly is going on with that approach and what's so contentious. But first, at the top of the show, the Georgia Senate runoffs. That's right. They determine control of the US Senate. Absolutely defining point of the US election.
You will be eliminated.
And they'll tell us a lot about how Biden's future presidency will be, how it will look, how successful its attempts to bring about any change, substantive change or reform, or even a COVID relief package will be. So all eyes are on Georgia on the 5th of January. And we're going to be talking about it because it really is going to be, this is huge. The Senate runoff like this hasn't been so high profile for ages, and it looks like $1 billion has been poured into the various political war chests here. Big money is, it's the most American political race of all time. We've got an African American on the Democratic side who's been demonized as some sort of America-hating radical by the Republicans. It's just a typical American election, isn't it? So, this is from the New York Times. Early voting numbers in the Georgia Senate races put the GOP on edge. Senator Kelly Loeffler issued a now familiar warning during a campaign event on Wednesday in Bibb County. If Democrats win the Georgia Senate runoff elections, there will be little left to stem a supposed rising tide of extremist socialism in America. But Dale Washburn, a Republican state legislator who introduced Miss Loeffler at the event, had another warning. This one was based not on ideology, but on numbers that suggested Democrats are outpacing Republicans in early voting turnout, which means that Republicans may need a tremendous Election Day performance on January the 5th if they are to win the state's two high-stakes runoff races and maintain control of the US Senate. Mr. Washburn said, "We're fully aware of the energy on the other side and think we've been reminded about that. We know demographics have changed in recent years, and if our side hasn't been aware of that, they're rapidly becoming aware of it, the Biden victory being a large part of that." So less than a week before Election Day, the last-minute challenges, messages and strategies for the two parties in Georgia's runoffs are coming into focus, even as polls indicate that the elections are too close to call. Those messages will be hammered home on the day before the elections by President-elect Joseph R. Biden, who plans to campaign on Monday in Atlanta, and by President Trump, of course, who will be holding a rally the same day in Dalton, a city in northwest Georgia. That's right, it's all happening in Georgia. So the big question is, what's the state of play? Here's a report from CBS News.
We are less than 1 week away from Election Day in the Georgia Senate runoff races. But according to the Elections Project, more than 2.5 million votes have already been cast. The two races will decide which party controls the Senate in January. President-elect Joe Biden plans to travel to Georgia on Monday to campaign for the two Democratic candidates, Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff. And President Trump is also holding a rally Monday to show support for the incumbent Republican senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. For more on this, I want to bring in Tia Mitchell. She's a Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Tell us what we've seen so far from early voting.
Well, of course, we have both in-person early voting and mail-in voting by absentee ballot, whether they drop it off in a drop box or put it in the mailbox. Yesterday was turnout has increased. You know, there was a drop-off because of Christmas and locations being closed. Today is the final day of in-person early voting in some counties, and then other counties are ending tomorrow. So we have seen those increases in longer lines at some of those early voting locations as people try to go ahead and get their votes in now as opposed to waiting until Election Day on Tuesday.
You have been reporting, of course, that Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue backed President Trump's push to increase stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000. What can you tell us about that, and do you have a sense of what effect that is having on this election?
So Loeffler and Perdue, their Democratic opponents, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, were really using that as a campaign issue ahead of their decision. You know, when President Trump started talking about increasing the stimulus to $2,000, those Democrats were saying, Loeffler and Perdue support Trump on everything else. Why won't they support Trump in increasing the stimulus for Americans? And so when Loeffler and Perdue did come out in favor of those checks, you know, I think it was a way for them to counter those attacks coming from the Democrats. But then Democrats said, wait a minute. It's one thing to say you support the checks. It's another thing for you to lobby and push Mitch McConnell to actually bringing that to a vote on the Senate floor. Because right now that has not happened, and it may not happen at all, which allows Loeffler and Perdue kind of to avoid making a vote that, you know, can be criticized by fiscal conservatives, but also appeasing those who want them to support the higher stimulus checks.
Right. President Trump and President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are all planning to campaign in Georgia in the...
So, that's the state of play. It is really close. It looks like this is going to be a base turnout thing. As I originally suspected, this is going to be a base turnout election for both parties. The Democrats need to ignite African-American turnout, seem to be doing so. They need to get that dormant progressive coalition out to the polls, and they need them to vote bigger than they did in November, essentially, if they want a chance of overcoming this. Because while they are way ahead, the Democrats right now, in early voting, there is going to be, particularly after President Trump has visited, there is going to be a tidal wave of whiter Republican turnout that will have been less motivated until up to this point. And that is going to be massive, probably record-shatteringly huge. So, again, maybe this will depend on the suburbs. So, the people in the suburbs who voted Democrat because they couldn't vote against Trump in 2018, who voted Biden but then Republican down ballot in November, are they going to vote for the Democrats here, or are they going to vote, you know, give Biden a blank check, or are they going to vote for the Republicans and sort of hold their nose? Or because Trump's associated with this, will they be turned off by it? It really depends. It's going to be really interesting. I'm not making an official prediction now. I will do a proper prediction later down the line. The GOP, the Republicans, retain a big edge in this race. The edge is shrinking. It looks more likely the Democrats will win than it did after the presidential election in November. However, I still think the Republicans are more likely to win than lose. Okay, there are so many structural things up against, including years of voter suppression, up against Democrats here. Why is it all going to change right now? Of course, it could, but and you know we've got Obama out on the ground. We've got this happening. Entirely plausible that African American turnout tips over the edge, and we turn out African American voters even more than we did last time. But equally, maybe not. And it's probably more likely not. We're hoping for this huge turnout. Is it going to come? We'll see. We know Trump's big turnout will come. So we're really having to test the immensely fragile Biden coalition out down ballot. And the Biden coalition doesn't seem to be working down ballot, or at least, the losses in the House and the failure to have a nice, clean win of the Senate would indicate such. Looking at this, Trump will help. His presence will help churn out the Republican base. And as I say, it could possibly to an unstoppable extent. Trump rallied the night before. Maybe that will tip it over the edge, and it will mean the election day turnout is so phenomenal among every single last MAGA supporter that it will be completely insurmountable. Wholly plausible as an outcome. Democrats need to talk about what's at stake. They need to talk. They need to tell a story, and they've done it to an extent, but they need to tell a story and continue to tell a story of Republican obstructionism. They need to tell a story of all the things that Republicans do to stop people voting, of all the things that can be passed if there is, if there is a House and a Senate and a presidency all aligned. And if that coalition turns out of the young, the disenfranchised, minorities, liberal white people, if that coalition, that fraught coalition comes out, suburban housewives, Trump's supposed suburban housewives that turned against him in the election. Of course, they're not housewives because we're in 2020, it's not the 1960s, but the suburbs, which are, contrary to President Trump's belief, increasingly diverse and generally, women have careers. It's 2020. But, the suburbs, minority communities, young people, liberal white people, if that fraught coalition can unite once again, Democrats have to deliver. Or it'll be the final nail in the coffin for progressives to vote Democrat. It'll be the final nail in the coffin for, crucially, Democrats' relationship with the black community. Because it's already waning. And a right-wing populist can probably appeal to that and pick off socially conservative black Americans quite easily if again, promises are broken. So if we get the Senate, they have to deliver. They have to make big change. They have to shout when they're being blocked. They have to really tell a story of, if nothing gets done, why it's not got done, who blocked it. And they have to use every tool at their disposal to get stuff done. This election looks like it's going to be a competition between the old-time coalition for the Republicans of white voters, of minority rule, of voter suppression, and a new progressive majority that Democrats have been wanting to unlock for years. Will that progressive majority manifest? Will they win the runoffs? If they do, that's a good sign. A very good sign for the future of progressive politics in the South. If not, well, that will have been the more likely outcome, and everything we already know still applies. Okay, let's talk about vaccinations. Let's talk about some criticism on the vaccine rollout. So, plans to delay giving the second dose of a COVID vaccine to more than 500,000 people who have received the first jab have caused outcry among doctors who say cancelling appointments wastes time, causes confusion among patients, and is potentially unethical. The government announced a change to its COVID vaccination strategy on Wednesday, saying second doses of the newly approved Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the previously approved Pfizer BioNTech jab would now be given up to 12 weeks after the first dose, so much longer than these people were told and was originally anticipated. The move applies to people scheduled to have their second dose of the Pfizer jab after the 4th of January, as well as those yet to receive either jab. The government said it hoped the approach would mean as many people as possible soon have some modicum of protection against the disease. The announcement caused controversy, however, and Pfizer and BioNTech warned that 2 doses of their vaccine were required for maximum protection against COVID, and that they did not have evidence that the first dose alone offered protection after 3 weeks. Let's have a listen.
The UK medicines regulator has approved the Oxford AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine. Along with the Pfizer vaccine that's already been given the green light, it paves the way for millions more people to be immunised in the new year. The UK government has ordered 100 million doses. That's enough to vaccinate 50 million people. The Oxford vaccine is much easier to transport and store than the Pfizer-BioNTech one already in use. It can be kept in a standard fridge and is also much cheaper at less than £3 a dose. The approval of the vaccine comes as the number of deaths from the coronavirus reported in the last 24 hours approached 1,000. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has the details.
The approval of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is a fantastic achievement for British science.
It's a great day. We're very proud.
This is a really significant moment in the fight against this pandemic.
It is, I think, a game-changing moment.
This is the vaccine, more than any other, that will eventually bring coronavirus under control. Unlike Pfizer's, which needs ultra-low temperatures, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine can be transported in a fridge, meaning every care home in the UK should now be in reach. The medicines regulator said no corners had been cut.
With this approval of the second vaccine, we are another step closer in helping to defeat this virus. Our clear message is that you can have every confidence in the safety, in the effectiveness and in the quality of COVID-19 vaccine AstraZeneca.
Okay, so in terms of this new policy, Azim Majid, a professor of primary care and public health at Imperial College London and a practicing GP, said he was shocked, quote, shocked by the change of plan, saying, "We've got thousands of people, or perhaps tens of thousands of people, who have already booked their second jabs. And these are people who are all elderly, so they often have to make special arrangements for their care and have someone to bring them down. Someone is going to have to ring all these patients to cancel their appointments and rebook them, so it is going to create a lot of work for people as well. Clearly, the people making these rules are not the ones having to enforce them. I understand the rationale that the government wants to increase the vaccine supply to make sure people are immunised, but I think that that could have been done for people starting from now, rather than cancelling the ones who have already been booked in, which is very disruptive. All this as daily cases hit 50,000, daily deaths 981. I mean, the numbers defy belief. The death numbers, we're nearly over 1,000 deaths. We're nearly at the worst point in terms of daily deaths that we've ever been. That's before, let this sink in, before the ramifications of the Christmas relaxation come through. That's we've not felt that yet. And it's also before the more of this kicks in. So if we go into a lockdown now, huge lockdown right this moment, today, then it's a few weeks of it getting worse before it gets better, right? Could we get 1,500 deaths a day, 2,000 deaths a day? Rest in peace to all the people that are dying. The fact that we've become numb to the degree of deaths that we're now experiencing is quite shocking. We are losing hundreds of citizens, nearly 1,000 citizens, every single day. Horrendous. I'm inclined to listen to these people that are saying that they're worried about this rollout. It sounds like it's disruptive. It sounds like it might be counterproductive in terms of getting this process along. And if it's counterproductive to that, it's counterproductive to the professed goals of speeding this along. We all want a speedy, efficient and successful vaccine rollout. The statistics in terms of the virus right now are staggering. The statistics in terms of the targets we're going to have to reach are also staggering. My advice to anyone, if they're offered the vaccine, is get the thing. Please get the vaccine. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's safe. It's effective. It's modern medicine at its best. It's human innovation at its best. So please get the vaccine. Teachers and frontline workers, in my view, should be getting it first. So frontline workers in the health service and teachers who've been tremendously overlooked and we're sending onto the front line with basically no equipment. And following that, the elderly, the very elderly in with those two, and then, the over 70s beyond that. I think it's teachers and frontline workers that need it quick, sharpish, because if those people are down, how in the hell are we going to keep the health system running and keep schools open? We're not. We want any hope of keeping schools open. Vaccinate the teachers, for goodness sakes. I think that the risk to education, the risk to the running of the NHS are great enough to make those measures necessary. Now, in terms of rolling out this vaccine, I want to see a couple of things. Things that we've seen have helped in America, which is a much more vaccine-averse country than Britain. I want to see education, huge rollout of public health information campaigns. We don't need to shut these people down. We need to convince. Of course, there are a few people who are insane anti-vaxxers will never change their minds, but there are a good number of people who are in the middle, who are a little bit apprehensive but believe in science, and we need those people in order for this to be a successful rollout that gets herd immunity. And I want to see public figures. I want to see Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, politicians of all stripes, public figures of all stripes in Britain take the vaccine on national television. This will help. Someone says, to give an idea of scale of deaths, a coach carried 50 passengers. The numbers announced today equate to 19 coaches. 19 coaches, 19 big coaches with 50 people on them. That's a huge coach. If that happened in a crash, think how disturbed we'd be. This is not, the frail dying off. 981. By the way, even if it was all the frail dying off, we should value those lives as much as we value anyone else's lives. But my point here is, these are not people. It's a myth that these are all people who are just going to die anyway. We're saying that about people who have asthma, people who happen to be pensioners, people who have any form of underlying condition. I think it's 60% of the American population that have an underlying health condition. Ridiculous. These are not dispensable deaths. If we take the approach of, unless you're really strong, you're going to die anyway, then it's eugenics. Half the public would be dead. Quarter of the public, half of the public, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous and shocking that logic is being applied, particularly on the right. Now, final story of the day. Gavin Williamson defending his testing diktats from above. Let's have a look at that. So, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has said he is absolutely confident that secondary schools will be able to run a mass COVID testing regime with that extra week to prepare. It's now been made compulsory, and they've given them an extra week, 7 days. Speaking on morning television, he said 78 million of extra funding, equipment such as personal protective equipment and support from the military would help get the programme set up, saying there's absolutely no reason that schools won't be ready. Asked if a week was enough time to prepare for a functioning mass testing system, Williamson said, "We are absolutely confident that it is. We'll be seeing all the testing equipment that is needed for schools being delivered on the 4th of January. Schools have already had notice of the guidance of what they need to do. They've also had notification of the extra 78 million that we're offering." Let's have a listen to Gavin Williamson on Sky News.
Firstly, what is the rationale for delaying the reopening of schools by a week?
Well, what we're going to be seeing is over 85% of primary schools welcoming back children on Monday of next week, but we have had to take some additional action in certain areas where COVID rates have been particularly high, and for public health advice is that actually by delaying the opening of some schools is being essential. But in terms of a secondary year groups, the reason that we have moved that back is so that we give all schools, every single school, every single college that teaches secondary age pupils the opportunity to roll out a mass testing regime, making sure that we root out this coronavirus. It's not just about making it safer for pupils, it's not just about making it safer for those who work in schools, but actually it's about rooting out coronavirus in our communities. And we did need to give schools a little bit extra time if we're moving from the position of offering schools the opportunity to do this to telling them that we expected them to do it for all secondary school pupils.
So will there be mass testing in schools? And if so, is a week enough time to prepare to have a functioning system?
We're absolutely confident as it is. We'll be seeing all the testing equipment that is needed for schools being delivered on the 4th of January. Schools have already had notice of the guidance of what they need to do. They've also had notification of the extra £78 million worth of money that we're offering up, helping them support it, get the right staff in there. And if I can also take the opportunity to thank our brilliant armed forces, 1,500 of who will be there to support schools that are having some...
So that'll be one soldier per 2 secondary schools. It's not great logistical help. They're expecting them to do this in a week, and they're setting up to blame them when it doesn't happen, which is horrendous. Divide and rule, very much still the Tory strategy. They're providing some resources, but there's no coordination. No one knows what they're doing. How on earth can you expect schools that have been underfunded, stripped of resources, and had little to no notice or guidance to be able to pull this off in a week? It would be logistically impossible. And he knows it. And he'll blame them. And the newspapers will say it's the lazy teachers. And the teachers' unions, obviously not happy. Head teachers' associations obviously saying, we can't do this. Teachers are being sacrificed on the altar of political optics. Gavin Williamson is among a cabinet that comprises primarily of duds. Gavin Williamson is the dud among duds. I think it's safe to say. You know, they're all crap. Gavin Williamson has a level of ineptitude that would make Dominic Raab look like a statesman. The young have been shafted once again by Tory governance, first with exams, now with this. And I'm telling you, and it was always the case, but even more so, the young will, over the next few decades, punish the Tories. In years to come, they will come to rue the day that they let down millennials and Gen Z in the way they have. They have nothing to offer them. They'll still have nothing to offer them as they enter a fractured jobs market, burdened with student debt, and little to no prospects of raising a family or getting on the housing ladder. They'll have nothing to offer them, and they will receive year upon year of electoral routings. And that will be revenge for what they've done to young people the past decade, particularly now. During this crisis, young people will remember that the government hurt them the most and considered them the least. So, there is no communication. The communication with schools from the education department has been shoddy. And the short notice of a week, I don't care how much logistical help you provide, it's laughably short notice. This is the sort of thing you should have thought about before Christmas. Way before Christmas. Beginning of December. I mean, these are just deeply unserious people who have no idea how to run a country, let alone a supposedly world-beating education system. Polling has shown that Tory voters, so 60% or so of Tory voters, side more on these issues. We're not saying do you side with the unions, but basically just in terms of do you think schools should shut, do you think we need to wait a bit longer, They're more hardline, they're more soft, they agree more, 60% of them, with the unions, the teachers' unions, than Labour. How pathetic is that? I don't care what your politics is. This is not the 1970s. You're not going to get political capital out of bashing unions. Labour is so bloody terrified of being told they're in the pocket of unions, which is a ridiculous right-wing trope you're always going to get. They say it about Joe Biden, right? So terrified of that they've decided to abandon unions, and thus a vital part of their constituency and their funding. So Labour aren't siding with the unions. Labour still won't say shut the schools, but the Tory voters side with them more. How stupid is that? Someone says teachers are being taken for granted because they are capable of organising things. Something alien to this government, all of them, not just the fireplace salesman. Yeah, Gavin Williamson, famously the fireplace salesman. Teachers have done, phenomenal. They're up there with nurses and doctors in terms of how they've stepped up during this pandemic. I will keep saying that. Teachers are people on the front line. It's highly unfair what's being done to them. It's obscene what's being done to them. And we need to, gather around our teachers and protect them because this government will not. That's it from me on the show today. We will, of course, be back at 7 o'clock tomorrow. Please subscribe. I'm going to be telling you something else, so stick around for a minute. But please subscribe. Get notifications on. We'll be back 7 o'clock tomorrow for your first ever MesmePolitics of 2020, bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a leftist perspective. I remain Toby Lafati Mesme. The name has not changed. Happy New Year. Have an amazing New Year's Eve. Inside and safe, of course. And we'll be with you all through 2021, keeping you up to date of what will be a very interesting and tumultuous year in geopolitics and indeed domestic politics.
Prepare to die.
We're heading into a decade of crises, this decade that we've just completed the 10th of, and 2021 will be no different. 2021 will be as interesting, as tumultuous as 2020, if not more, but we can hope be slightly less horrific and traumatic. We live in hope. Later on tonight at 20 to 11, 20 minutes before we formally depart from the European Union. Obviously, you know, we sort of technically left on the 31st of January this year, but we will be, you know, separating ourselves from all the EU institutions and formally, in practice, you know, leaving. There'll be a special show, special half-hour show with me, MesmePolitics, a MesmePolitics special, the first we've ever done, and it's called Brexit Done, because 11 o'clock tonight will mark Brexit well and truly being done. For better or for worse, I'll be offering my thoughts, a broader perspective on the route from 2016 and the referendum to here, what the left should think. I'll be busting some progressive myths.
You will be eliminated.
And I'll be telling you, well, this is dreadful, and these terms of departure are also dreadful, and the government is dreadful. Why maybe it's not all bad, and also why the left should always have been for exit from the European Union. Because we should. I am. I will remain being. And I'll be putting forward some arguments on that. So whether you are a Eurosceptic Remainer, you know, Remain and Reform, whether you are a Lexiteer, you'll get something out of tonight's show. If you're a right-wing Eurosceptic, you probably won't, because right-wing Eurosceptics are essentially chasing unicorns. And if you're a serious Lexit proponent, please tune in. I mean, we welcome everyone, but you'll probably disagree with me if you are not a Lexiteer or a Remain and Reformer. See you then.